Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar from Telenor IoT, where we're going to go through our reflections from the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona last week. We're a bunch of people from Telenor IoT there. I was one of them, and my name is Martin Whitlock. I'm CTO at Telenor IoT. And another one who was there was Bengt Nordström, industry veteran.
Thank you.
Please, for the sake of the audience, introduce yourself.
Yes, so Bengt Nordström, long timer in the industry, actually more than 40 years, left Accenture last year and is now a senior advisor to Analysys Mason, who I'm sort of representing today when I'm sharing my thoughts about Mobile World Congress.
And you were there scouting, and how many times have you been scouting MWC?
It's almost embarrassing, but I think it's 32 probably. It's actually difficult to keep track since I started in '89.
Yeah, that's impressive. But that also counts for some perspective on things. So it's going to be really interesting to hear you. And actually, we're going to have a small discussion in a group here with some other people who also was at MWC. But first, we have the pleasure to listen to you, Bengt, to summarize some of your reflections, right?
Thank you, Martin. Yes, happy to do that. So we have a small agenda. First, giving an overall view about the Mobile World Congress, what I think happened overall. Then diving more into Cellular IoT. I would like to talk about its being a growth business, and then talking about a bit of the trends of the players in this industry and the possible scenario of consolidation, and then moving into finally some of the key IoT trends I saw in Barcelona. Something like that. So if we start with the overall picture then, I think according to GSMA, this was a record attended event, 109,000 people. I could sense that is maybe an inflated number, but it actually, it's back to 2019 numbers according to the GSMA then. And I collected here about 5 points that I think were the most important ones. On the left-hand side here, you have AI. So if you remember last year, we were sort of embraced, overwhelmed by generative AI because it was really in the hype and arrival of generative AI. And that impacted the whole conference last year, almost to the extent it was a AI Mobile World Congress, you can say. This year, we're 12 months later, and basically all solution and product companies have embraced AI in their portfolios. But I also note that when you scratch on the surface and ask detailed questions, most companies are really in an early stage. They have begun using AI, but it's more in the sort of conventional machine learning area. And there's no criticism in saying so. It's just very natural. It takes time to embrace AI fully in any company's business. Secondly, I think satellite is a super interesting area that we all need to pay attention to. So satellite communication by portable devices have probably been around for 30 years or so, very bulky. But over the last year, and thanks to Elon Musk, whatever we think about him, he has sort of advanced technology, lowered cost, shortened lead times for launching satellites, and that is having a big impact on this industry. So we have come to a stage where you actually can use your normal 4G, 5G phone, and you can be connected to satellite, which means that you have service outside your normal coverage area. And this is, of course, very interesting and important. I would say there are 2 front runners. There is AST Space Mobile, who use super advanced antenna techniques in their satellites. So they have massive MIMO on LEO over Earth, and that is being launched as we speak now. And the second one is Starlink, backed by Elon Musk then, who is offering direct-to-cell service. So I think from an IoT perspective, I'll come back to that later, but it actually means that we can be connected outside normal coverage area, which is very interesting. And I think my personal reflection there is that if I went to this conference with the view that satellite is purely complementary to terrestrial coverage, I sort of coming out of Barcelona, I more think that it can probably replace some of the terrestrial network. Maybe not at the expense or competition with operators, but actually lowering cost for providing service in low traffic areas. So definitely an area to follow closely. Then moving into 6G, a lot of demos in Barcelona in 6G. I spent a lot of time in Ericsson's booth and looking through their demos. It's a lot about increased data speed, more capacity, lower latency, AR, VR, digital twins, and everything else around that. Maybe my bullet here is a bit harsh to the industry because I say it's the wrong focus, but I think it's worth paying attention to that many operators around the world have launched 5G, and it, in spite of higher data speed, more capacity and lower latency, it hasn't resulted in increased revenues in most cases. And to then at an event say that now we come with even more capacity, even more throughput, even lower latency, it's not the message that goes down very well with operators. So I think what I realized when I listened to the demos is that there are many technological advancements in 6G that actually would allow operators to launch and build networks faster and at a lower cost than they do today. And that is much more addressing the need for operators. So that's one takeaway. Then geopolitical and economical impact of the new US administration was very present. I would say I didn't start any conversation or meeting with a client with that angle, but it always came up. It was people are worried from a sort of personal perspective, what happens with me and my family, my country, security. Are all the alliances built up over 80 years, are they just disappearing? What's happening in that angle? And the other angle is, of course, the economical impact for our industry, because mobile industry is one of the most global interconnected ecosystems that exist anywhere, when we are so dependent on that we can have manufacturing in one country, assembly in a second country, and usage of that product in a third country. And if we get these trade barriers, tariffs, it will hurt business. So that was like a wet blanket over the whole event, I would say. Then finally, on the sort of observations there, of course, people talk about 5G standalone, 5G advanced, network slicing. Actually, very good progress since last year. Ericsson have launched this Duna platform concept that should facilitate network API usage. So it has attracted a number of operators. But I also note that the actual impact, if you ask questions like, so how much more money do you make from this? That's still on a very low level. So good progress, but still little impact. Then on the right-hand side, if you look at this slide, taken a few shots that I think are maybe representatives. On the lower side, I think if you like to draw attention to your booth and have visitors, nothing beats a car. That's how the industry works. So that was present, and now these vehicles are connected in various forms, so that's sort of cool. But it's a nice way to draw attention to your booth, and if you don't have that, you can have robotic dogs and things like that. On the sort of Men in Black picture of me there on the top, I think this is I thought it was interesting to try this Ray-Ban Meta AR glasses. It's a good illustration where we are heading in this industry. The device market is super exciting right now, which again impacts the IoT business as well. So with this one, you can take photographs, you can listen to music, have conversations. It's not sort of 5G connected; it's based on Bluetooth, but it's promising for the future, I would say. So that's sort of the overall takeaway. Then I like to talk about cellular IoT as a growth area. Now, if you go back like 17 years ago or so, Ericsson came to Mobile World Congress and said that there would be 50 billion connected devices. I don't know which year, 2030, I think they said. And of course, that was an overpromise, and we have underdelivered on that promise. And it was really unrealistic in the first place. But it was a nice statement, and it got a lot of attention. And then 17 years later, you can say that we have, in many aspects, a very mature industry. So mobile broadband for consumers, for B2B market, has sort of slow growth. According to the analysis made on stats here, it's about 2% CAGR. And will probably be on that. We have connected most people that we can connect, at affordable rates. FWA, fixed wireless access, where we instead of fiber or cable use cellular technology, is a nice growth area. But then, if you then look at IoT, it's actually, I would say, the fastest growing area in cellular industry right now. Now, it's from a lower base. If you look at the stats here, you can see on the bottom left side that we are about 9% growth. And the good thing with that, with IoT, is that that's so far away from mature market it can be. It has sort of potential like 10 or 15, 20 billion connections as the ecosystem around devices evolves. So we are in a very interesting growth phase in this industry. And then on the right-hand side, we have the sort of verticals represented in our statistics here. And you can see that basically all of them have strong double-digit CAGR growth. So we are in the right space in very exciting times, I would say. Moving to the next. So then, a reflection I make in about IoT is that, not because of this 50 billion promise 17 years ago, but because we all were excited about cellular IoT 15, 20 years ago. Basically, any and all vendor went into this space. Any and all operator went into this space. And I think many of them have realized that IoT business is very, very interesting, but it's very different from normal consumer and B2B market. So that has led to we have a super fragmented ecosystem in this industry. And you can say, I broadly would do two categories of this. One category is the ones that have prudently addressed the IoT market, that has sort of done it with sound business case analysis, sound investment case, understanding the verticals and everything else around it. And then you have the second category, which is sort of the fragmented subscale players. And there are more of those than there are companies that are well positioned. I love to hear from the Telenor colleagues later here on how they view this consolidation scenario. Because what happens is that both on the platform side, if you're a vendor, many of them are really legacy-based today. And where it costs more to update them than it's worth revenue-wise. I think Ericsson's sell out of IoTA 2 years ago or so is such an example, actually. And then on the on the operator side, there are so many home-built platforms that were built many, many years ago, where the reality is that it costs more to sell subscriptions than you have the benefit of it. The cost of adding a user, doing configuration and management is too expensive. So I expect over the next coming years, this will be an interesting space for the one that have sort of managed their path through IoT growth in a sound way, and others will be actually quite happy to leave it because it's not a very promising market for them. I've listed a few examples here on the right-hand side of this slide, but I won't go through them in details, but it's just sort of illustration, if you like to read afterwards, of consolidation that has taken place already. So then coming to the last slide in this presentation, I'll just highlight 4 areas that sort of caught my attention in Barcelona, and in all honesty, one's areas that I had an eye on and I've been monitoring before, but I sort of got confirmed in Barcelona that yes, this is what the industry is focusing on. This is what is really interesting right now. The first one is the further evolution of eSIM. So eSIM has been around for like 10 years or so, and more talk than action, but it has become relevant in the consumer space. So, for instance, when I meet with my Asian friends and colleagues in Barcelona, although they work for GSMA, they have actually bought an eSIM subscription from an aggregator. So as an example, you can sort of go from Singapore to Barcelona. You can buy an eSIM subscription that costs you 35 euros or so, and you have unlimited usage in Europe. That's not a bad deal compared to what the roaming cost would be if you did that. So in consumer market has a role already, and I think many of you have perhaps tried. When you come to a new country where there isn't decent roaming deals available, you can sort of click a QR code and get the local subscription base. So that's on the consumer side. Then on the IoT side, it has been more restricted, I think, for technical limitations. And now with a SGP 32 standard that is sort of more targeting the industrial market, we have something boiling that is very, very interesting. So I think one reflection is that it's very, very good for operators that are selling IoT solutions where a large roaming footprint is important. And for instance, where maybe the normal arrangement of roaming deal is too costly, then eSIM will play a very important role. And this time around, with the new standard, it's also goes both ways. It's sort of consumer activated, but it's also sort of host operated as a technology. It has an enhanced security feature that is sort of super important, as we all know right now. That is very strong momentum. I went into a seminar only dedicated to eSIM. It was fully attended, and a lot of promises of how big this will be, and particularly targeting the industrial sector, automation and digitalization of industries were easy. Then, as we all know, things take time in this industry. So I don't think we should expect a sort of eSIM breakthrough in 2025, 2026. But I think it's important for any company that is sort of exploring IoT opportunities, is RedCap part of your supplier's roadmap? Is there a holistic storytelling around it? Can you provide it end to end? And so forth. And gradually then in 26, 27, 28, something like that. It will actually be more material. Then another area below that is RedCap, reduced capacity, which is, you can say, a narrow band standardization coming from 3GPP that is sort of trying to make the best out of latency, cost, energy consumptions, and data throughput. So it's very nicely positioned in the dotted triangle in the middle here. It has sort of a little bit of everything. And I was maybe hoping to see more. I've been hearing rumors about that the Chinese ecosystem, very IoT focused, China Mobile and those players would be very advanced. I think I saw some of that, but it was also a realization of that things like this take a little bit of time. So if you remember narrowband IoT Cat-M, for instance, was, I think, relaunched in 2016, something like that. And NB IoT seems to be all like a marginal technology in our industry, as I read it now, while Cat-M actually is sort of the main narrowband offering. But we're also 9 years later in this industry, so things like this take time, but it's certainly a very interesting development. Then on the right-hand side, which I partly commented on already, is the satellite impact, which I think most bigger players in the operators that are dealing with IoT have satellite solutions already. But it's really on a different technology. It's more sort of an assembly for an offering rather than a fully integrated solution. So satellite has been around, but with this evolution that you actually can access satellite directly from your device will have a very, very interesting impact, and of course increase the coverage footprint for IoT solutions. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And I will also say that given the geopolitical situation right now, it's a bit hard to say how will this play out. It's not obvious that companies will go all in on Starlink-based, Elon Musk-based solutions. Not if I consider what I heard in Barcelona. There is a worry. So then I think there will be an opportunity for sort of other providers to step up to make sure that there are many more different solutions available. But it's a main trend, and I think it will have a huge advantage for users both in consumer, normal B2B, and IoT market. Then final point in my observations will be about AI and digital transformation. As I said before, you cannot, as a supplier of anything, go to Barcelona and say, no, we don't prioritize AI. We don't think it's important. Then it's better to stay at home, actually. So you all need to be there. And companies have taken this very seriously. So there are, this AI RAN, for instance, that the base station market will have huge AI support is an important area. And there are many operators and vendors teaming up to make that happen. My observation here is that it's super important to understand that leveraging AI is not sort of done on a point-by-point or product-by-product basis. The whole idea about AI and becoming a data-driven company is that you actually have a data strategy, that you are intending to go from hardware, software sales to selling as a service, and where the whole organization is actually data-driven from HR, finance, product development, sales, and marketing. So it's a journey that takes time, But I also say that there is no other way forward than having this sort of strategy of as quickly as possible becoming a data-driven company. So I think those are my takeaways from Barcelona.
Not bad, Bengt. It seems to me you actually did try to walk around and get all the impressions you could. So thank you for sharing. And talking about sharing, we will actually invite some additional colleagues from Telenor IoT up on stage here, and we will continue to discuss. But before that, I'd like to remind you that are online that there's a possibility to ask questions in the webinar tool and interface. So please do that, and I will try to, in that case, bring some of them up later on. But before that, please come on stage here, and I will introduce you one by one later on. But we have Marie Högberg, Luciana Widengren, and Anders Bresell here from the Telenor IoT team. And Marie, maybe you can start introducing yourself.
Thank you, Martin. Very nice to be here. My name is Marie, as Martin just said, and I am responsible for Telenor IoT's ambition towards the automotive vertical. So that's me.
And Luciana?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Luciana. So I'm part of the management team here in Connection, and I'm responsible for legal, regulatory, but also pricing strategy.
And finally, Anders.
Hello, my name is Anders Bresell, and I'm head of data, leading our data science and analytics department here at Telenor IoT. And I participate in both customer meetings and doing all sorts of solutions for internally and externally for delivering insights to the right person at the right time. I love data. That's the only thing you need to know about me.
Data. Yeah, and that's probably one topic we're going to get back to. But before that, I picked up on you had a question to us, almost, Bengt, it sounded like, regarding consolidation in the market. And first of all, I think that my first response to that is that we see it as well. It's a crowded space out there. We're very much intending to be part of that journey as well. But a question from your perspective here, maybe first in relation to the industry as a whole, because we've seen the need for consolidation in the industry elsewhere than IT, I think, as well in the past. Do you see a difference here in IT where we are right now compared to a crowded domestic MNO space, for instance? And why should you consolidate from your perspective?
I think the answer is that it's, if you think the normal consumer and B2B market is fragmented or need consolidation, then IoT is, 5x that or something like that. You can take I think in the normal conventional operator market, one of the European challenges is that there are three big US operators. There are basically three big Indian operators. There are three big Chinese operators. And then we have 100 operators in Europe. And it's not easy to fix that because we are sort of sovereign countries. So I don't think anyone is thrilled by the idea that Europe should be served only with three operators. But it still illustrates the problem that fragmentation. The big drawback in Europe is that we cannot invest as much as the peer countries, the leading industrial countries can. And I think that's where IoT is as well. I would say generally, I'm not sort of fully updated about Telenor IoT and your architecture and platform and how much you invest, but I know from several examples in Europe that many of the players that went in, I would say, aggressively, like 15 years ago, they have actually not invested in their platforms. So they are sort of, I think I already mentioned that, it costs them more to get market share than the benefit of having more market share. So I expect, I think, and the whole platform side with the CSPs, and who can sort of build scale on that is one opportunity for consolidation. And the other side of it is, of course, the platform players themselves. You know, there aren't that many left in reality. So I think the opportunity for those ones that have the blessing from their owners, the money from the owners to consolidate is actually super interesting.
No, I agree. And to comment, we of course do invest. And I think one way of looking at it is that where we are as Telenor IoT, operating as a standalone company as well, provides the focus, I think, on the IoT business because it's different. And I think that is something we may see in other players in the industry as well, that IoT investments are fighting for general 5G rollouts or whatever. That becomes problematic. But one thing we do invest in is in automotive. And Marie, you're responsible for that part of our company. I have a question for you, actually. There are a lot of automotive players in Barcelona during MWC, which is otherwise a telco-driven event. What's your reflections on that? Why is it?
Yeah, you're so true. Absolutely. There is a lot of automotive companies visiting MWC. And I think looking back at one of the graphs that you showed us, automotive is the largest IoT vertical. We see already today a lot of connected cars, and we see that number to grow. So therefore, as a car manufacturer, having a team working with connectivity, for them to be at MWC is really a good opportunity to understand what is happening in the industry. And it's a place where you can meet different partners in the ecosystem, operators like us, platform providers, SIM vendors, chipset manufacturers. I mean, you can somehow get the full solution perspective when you are there. And given how important connectivity is becoming for cars, I mean, it's a very important place to visit, I think.
Yeah. And Bengt, reflection from your side. Was it 30-ish MWCs you've been visiting before? Because my own reflection is that enterprise presence from verticals outside of telco is increasing and has been increasing quite rapidly. Is it due to IoT, you believe?
I would say so, yes. I actually thought a few years ago it was hard to understand what did all these non-telco companies do at Mobile World Congress other than getting lunch and dinners paid and so forth. But that is obviously changing, and I think it's touching on something I was planning to mention in my presentation, but now when you mention it, I got the opportunity. And that is one of the most interesting developments in IoT is that it's an industry that has been narrowband focused because we started with GSM. More tariffs were high, so we had to use as little bandwidth as possible when we built the services. Now, like 25 years later, broadband isn't that expensive any longer. And that means that the value of using cellular technology has increased. And it harmonizes so well with the ambition to become data-driven companies. So I think that development makes it relevant for many, many more industry verticals to be in Barcelona. And I think that's what we saw.
Yeah, I agree. One thing though, and maybe one thing that some of the automotive players are scouting as well, because it's definitely related to their business, but that is the regulatory environment. And Bengt, you touched upon the geopolitical situation that we have right now, but also in other spaces, it's increasing in complexity, I would say. Luciana, would you agree as head of that?
Yes, I agree. And I agree that the geopolitical landscape is, changing and there is an uncertainty. But besides that, we have a number of regulatory challenges like cybersecurity and the fragmentation, especially in Europe with many different regulations and the impossibility or like the difficulty to merge. So I think this is actually a opportunity coming ahead because the Commission is aware and there is a push from the MNOs to actually have a better, the possibility to have more mergers. And with that, releasing capital for more investments in IoT.
And because isn't it fundamentally different perspectives here? On one hand, we see complexity rising and regulation may not look the same depending on which region you're in. But as a global IoT player like ourselves, serving customers that want to go everywhere, they want to have simplicity and one way of doing it. You mentioned EU here, but do you see any trends on this being synchronized globally, or is it the opposite?
No, it is not synchronized. I would not say that it is the opposite, but of course, as IoT is scaling up, regulators are more aware, and then there is a complexity. But I think it's good that at least from a starting point in Europe, there is awareness and there is a push to try to simplify, harmonize, create possibility to more cross borders. Develop or deployments. So, and I think the important here is to think that you have like a provider that understands the international landscape, understand the regulation, and can have a solution that it is compliant and at the same time simple. And that is what we are trying to do here.
But it's not easy.
No.
One thing, talking about regulation, is of course about data. Anders, that's your home turf, isn't it?
Yes.
And Bengt, you mentioned that you shouldn't go to MWC without a convincing AI story. I was thinking, Anders, I mean, you obviously both talked and watched about AI during the week there, but do you think everybody has a convincing AI story?
Well, at least for me, as an expert in the field, I didn't see it convincing. A lot had showcase AI in one way. So there were these robots doing all sorts of funny things. But it was a little bit hard to understand how different enterprises and vendors actually will utilize this and how it will benefit the customers and end users in the long run, how it actually will, the bottom line results that we're all striving for also. It was not very convincing, I would say. Maybe I wasn't everywhere, but in general, it was more showcasing we have the capability to do AI. What are we using it for? To get this cool robot. So that's my impression.
I think so. I noticed that myself as well. That sometimes when you put the second question on the AI story, it was still a bit vague. And I don't know if anyone wants to comment that, but my own reflection was a little bit that a few years ago when digitization was on the hot topic, everybody made an effort to put the CDO in the management team or something like that. And I think it took a while for the industry to understand what it actually meant to digitize and what it meant for the business. I think to some extent we might be in a similar situation now. Anyone seen the same? Bengt, you're nodding.
Yeah, no, it's a super interesting question because I think many companies in our industry, you hear this digitalization is important, so we appoint a CDO, right? That was quietly changed, and now it's Chief Data Officer because it's not digitalization itself, it's how you use data. So you get a check in that box. Then you employ 5 data scientists. So you can, to the board, say that, yes, we are focusing on AI and data. But this sort of more holistic approach to actually put an organization in place where CEO down to the whole leadership through the operations, yes, we understand data, we use data. We have put an architecture in place that allows us to have access to the data, and we use data to drive our business, to understand our customers. That takes time. I think we are all trying to go there, but I have a lot of respect for how long time it will take. And part of 2024, I think, was was the experience of, okay, we have to move faster to the cloud. We have to use generative AI in our business. And then you get the bill from your hyperscaler colleagues, whether it's Google, AWS, or Azure, say, oh, it's not cheap to use generative AI. Maybe I need to rethink my strategy. It will be super costly to do this across the company. So this sort of DeepSeek development that came last year, I think it was, or maybe beginning of this year, that's actually, I was thinking, without valuing every aspect of it, this is exactly what we need. We must have much lower computing cost if it's going to be deployed holistically in any business.
Oh, I agree. And Anders, you're going to get the microphone back here, because I think there are, of course, companies that had a AI story, which I hope was convincing, including ourselves. And you didn't only observe at MWC, Anders, you were also speaking about what we have been doing. But what were your reflections from that, and how was it received?
Yeah, so I was telling the audience in our booth during a talk about our AI-powered monitoring solution for the global connections we have. We ran that for 5 years now, and we could tell a little bit of the learnings around that. Interestingly, it's still surprising. We were telling this story first this year, during 2024, multiple different times, and it still strikes me that people are extremely impressed that we actually have this, and when people in the business have been around seeing what you can do with control plane level data in high volumes, they say they've never seen this at this scale and at this advanced use case. That tells me that the feedback also around the presentation was very, very good. It tells me that we are extremely well advanced and well positioned and market leader in utilizing data. And what you described, Bengt, is what I experience in this company. There's so much data savviness and utilization of data and so on. And we have this architecture in place and all that. That is the prerequisites, absolutely. And the same goes for AI. And very interesting thing about that you said around AI and the cost of it. Because many went into cloud, many built data platforms, and then they saw the bill and all this, and they started to, is this really valuable? And so on. And then we'll see. But yeah, that was one of the reflections.
And it definitely can be valuable. We know that. Switching topics slightly, going back to what you also talked about, Bengt, eSIM development. And I was actually going to ask Luciana a question to start with, because I think one thing with eSIM is the relationship to roaming. And we've been working with eSIM for quite some time, probably one of the first outs with it, but we also noticed the slow uptake and challenging with technology, but looking forward to push the button now on the SGP32. What are your thoughts, Luciana, on that when it comes to network access?
Yes, I think now we're finally seeing SGP32 come into play, but I do still feel that roaming will still be like the driving force for connecting devices, even if it will be easier to switch providers. I do feel that still it's for, we're going to have those two use cases. One still for insurance, where you have like markets where you have actually an issue, like a regulatory impediment. Then it will be very good to have like a really good technology to be able to switch. And then, of course, we're going to see potentially a different type of like business case really around driving swap around costs. So, but still, I think roaming will still play a definitely role. And I don't see that SGP32 or localization will replace roaming.
How was the talk, Bengt, about that?
No, it struck me actually when I looked at this in Barcelona that on one hand, I can hear from industrial companies that what they would like is a very simplified solution where you have an eSIM solution in the product and you access any and all networks in the world, right? That's sort of the North Star for them.
Sounds simple enough.
And then you realize that, but that might happen in consumer market, because if you are coming to a specific country and all you do is to activate through a QR code a local subscription, you are not that worried about quality of service. You get what you get. But IoT business is an end-to-end offering. So, even if you use eSIM technology and you can access many different local networks without roaming, it still comes back to the question, who is monitoring the service? Who is guaranteeing quality of service? So I think that's also a reason of just from a SLA perspective why it will have an option. But in combination, I think roaming in combination and then adding markets where roaming for various reasons isn't readily available, then it's a very interesting proposition.
Marie, what are your thoughts? Or like a customer base like the Automotive is, of course, always interested in eSIM solutions, but are these expectations aligned, you think, or?
I mean, I also definitely believe in a combination, as you said. And I think we see already today in Automotive, at least among the more mature players, and, we see different deployment models to what extent you use roaming and local. But most car OEMs, they have a portfolio of MNO partners they work with. And I think, that's quite natural given the need for quality, the right pricing, the regulatory challenges that somehow you end up here right now. And I see that probably the SGP32 development will, just more or less, cement that type of development. We will see that. And that's also why we now see, I think it's a lot of, it comes with a lot of opportunities in a way, this technology, but it also enhances complexity because you need other types of mechanisms to steer what partner connectivity solution. We can also maybe look into, it's not only cellular, maybe in the future, what to use where. And then, when you need platform and data and other type of logics that you need to implement, maybe both in the cloud and in the hardware in the car, to actually work with the technology in an efficient way over time. So it comes with a lot of opportunities, but it also increases complexity. That's what I see.
Can I ask the automotive expert a question?
Ask a question. You can take my job. Yeah.
No, I was thinking, given the turbulence in the automotive market, you have this sort of electricity push, Tesla rising, European car makers struggling a bit. So when you listen around to automotive makers today, where do you find sort of the most furthest thinking, progressive ideas about how to leverage cellular IoT?
Oh, that's a very hard question, Bengt. Yes, no, but I think more or less across the industry, I think there is a joint view of the importance of a car being connected. And we can see that it's not about like typical telematics use cases anymore, where we had like an app and you could turn on the heater or unlock your car. Now it's much more. And I can more or less see that everyone is driving in that driving in that direction. Also a Gothenburg joke. So I mean, it's the whole in-car infotainment topic, the over-the-air updates, the collection of data to become more data-driven in the way you deploy software, in the way you can sell services maybe towards your end user. So I would say that we see a lot of progressing thinking everywhere because the EVs as such, they have of course come with a mindset shift that the car becomes more digital as well. But maybe it's not the EVs as such that is really the driving force. It's more that it's a big shift in the industry with the whole software defined and EVs and so on. So that's my view. I cannot say like where. Of course, we see a lot of progression. We see China as a driving force. We work a lot with them. But what I also think is interesting, just a final reflection before I hand the mic to someone else, is that depending on where the car OEM has its home market, could be China, could be Europe, could be US, you might have a little bit of a different mindset in how you think, how you would like to deploy technology, because you know how things are done in your home market. So we see that it's not like the same request coming from different OEMs. It might look a little bit different. Yeah.
You're nodding, Lucian. You want to add something there? Or?
No, I was going to say that I agree. We can see like a diversity of requests from the different automakers, and also that they are maybe subject to different type of regulations. We can see like the requests we get from China is different than the ones we get in Europe.
But also in analytics, right, Anders? I mean, I think automotive is always fun for us in the IoT space because they are sort of driving everything at the same time forward, pushing us on all levels. But in AI...
Yeah, but let me first comment on the automotive and the changes I see. And what has really struck me as a new paradigm is that before it was we had to have some kind of connectivity for the telematics or whatever it was, but now there is not only different use cases like entertainment, software over the air, updates, telemetry and so on, and maps, whatever it can be, but also these different use cases has different requirements. So some of them can wait until there are other connectivity available, which means that there is another logic now coming in that has not been really in need in the market before. There's some very interesting discussions I heard around in the conference that this is what the car OEMs are discussing around right now. That it's not only having all the options available. Now you need to say what can we use for when and what and where.
And here actually that's a great segue to another topic that I want to discuss with you guys, because you mentioned 6G, Bengt, and I hope we are in alignment when we say that we're not really done with 5G yet in the industry, right? So if you're an automotive customer or something else and you visit MWC, how do you react to that? You see big players like Ericsson and other smaller players also talking about 6G by now. And you're in this position, like you design your solutions and what to use when. Do I need to do 6G? What about 5G? If you're an enterprise.
I think that the important thing to understand with 6G is that we are in a completely different situation than we have been with any other launch of a new standard, a new technology. And that is that at large we have solved the normal problems of throughput, capacity and latency. So every time we have launched a new technology, it has been a pioneering operator that has stood up and say, I go for this first, and I like to get the benefits of being an early mover.
Often from South Korea.
Yeah. Yes, and in 4G it was Verizon, in 3G it was Hutchison, in 2G it was Mannesmann in Germany. This is the advantage of having been around for 40 years. If you then say, so who would pioneer a macro base station network launch of 6G in 2030? It's actually a bit challenging to define who that would be and for what purpose. One reason is that we are getting the 6 gigahertz band is becoming available in 5G, I think, in 2028, 2029, something like that. It's not entirely global. The US is working on, some of the US players are working to make it available in the US as well. And then we have a sort of a global new band with almost that will solve our capacity problems forever.
Fantastic.
At least. And then okay. This long answer, I would say that I expect that 5G is one of these technologies that will be around for a very, very long time. So if I was an enterprise, I would probably maybe start with 4G, looking at the coverage footprint globally. but make sure that I have a sound roadmap cost TCO based for 5G as well. Because now when we have all this capacity and we're gradually getting 5G standalone rolled out and available, that will last for a very, very long time. So I would keep an eye on 6G, but I would, if it was for commercial purpose and using it in my business, I would be 4G, 5G based. And be convinced of that will take me many, many years into the 2030s.
Yeah, because the hard truth is that a lot of our customers are actually looking at 2G now, because that's a technology that will sunset. So the span is big. But do you agree, Marie? Do you get questions about 6G from...
No, I would say I've never got a 6G question. I think
probably good.
I think many car OEMs are still thinking about when to introduce 5G. I think that is the big question. And sometimes, I have been in the situation that I've also been on the enterprise side. And sometimes I think that our industry, we are in a fortunate position just to provide the guidelines and the insights that we have, but we don't have to make the decisions what to deploy. But our customers have on the enterprise sides. And I can just share my experience, and it's very, very difficult because you need to make decisions today for something to build maybe in 5 years from now. And you don't really know where the technology will be then. And then you know that in my case, then the cars will be out there on the roads for 10 to 15 to 20 years. So we look so many years ahead. And to make the right investment decisions now, it's hard. And in addition to the Gs, we of course now also see other things coming in like satellite and Wi-Fi. And it comes with a cost, and technology in an early phase is normally also quite expensive, and you have a limited budget, and it's really a puzzle. Not easy, I would say.
I was going to say also about the TCO. I mean, not even counting that you need a device that works with that technology as well, right? So I don't know if you have seen any 6G devices, but I'm thinking that this is also a question that plays a role, when you're making that decision.
And from your perspective, Anders, I was curious. I mean, you're in a data science domain, and I guess I don't know that you're always looking at the latest functionality available in AWS and try to take advantage of that and so on. But I mean, in this context, from a pure technology perspective.
Yeah. So my reflection is like this, because when you work in cloud and data, and you have you can turn off and on things at your own will, your control over a whole chain, more or less. But in automotive or IoT, there's a chain. The value chain is much longer and spans more partners and stakeholders. So it's not so easy to make the decisions there, I would say. So what I've seen is that if you go over the latest, I know I had this story from a truck manufacturer saying that when you launch a new product, you had to set the hardware specs 3 years ahead, and then it's going to last 50 years. That's from a data perspective is what can you process on a 3-year-old hardware when it's launched? Okay, that's one perspective. How much data, the connectivity, what can you send to a cloud when it's launched versus 15 years around? That's reflections that I've done, that IoT is not super easy, but it's challenging and exciting. But there are ways that you should think about what can you control, and that you can go a little bit more broad, that you can change and so on, and be a little bit more aggressive. Or things that you don't control, you need to think that these should be around for long.
And talk about networks. Non-terrestrial, satellite. I think this was also something that I picked up, and it's a lot of things happening. And going back, we talked about cost and TCOs and investments. I actually have a question for you, Bengt, on that, if you have any perspective on it. Because, I mean, telco industry has always been quite CapEx intense, right? We build networks and we build capacity, and often we do it in overlapping infrastructures because we have competition on each and every market and so on. Sending up satellites, to me, seems to be a pretty CapEx-intense business as well. And we have now several players popping up. Have you observed anything here or in your discussions during MWC about, is this going to be sustainable from a cost perspective, capacity perspective? Where does it make sense to use satellites when we also build terrestrial networks in parallel? Will they coexist in a good way?
That's a good question. Well, if you put it like this, if you think about what would it cost to build terrestrial coverage in sparsely populated areas, deserts, sea, we can take northern part of Sweden and so forth. There is no business case for that. So in that segment, I think the business case is fairly robust for satellite. So that's why it's happening. And then the more you move into the capacity intensive space, the more challenging it will be, because sometimes when the most sort of people that are promoting satellite have sometimes an idea of that it can replace terrestrial networks completely. And my point is that, well, then you need as many satellites as there are base stations in the world, because it's ultimately capacity driven. And that for that there is no business case. So I think satellite works well, and I can say, if you take Sweden, I mean, you are using net for extensive 5G network. It has very good coverage. Maybe not now, but maybe 5 years from now, the CTOs can get together and say, can we remove 1,000 sites in areas where we have terrestrial coverage today, and do that, use satellite? That is, I'm not saying it will work, but it's the kind of things that current momentum of satellite leads to. If that answers. So it works well, as when you don't need to put up towers and masts, because those are costly too.
No, I think it resonates very well in my own thoughts, and I see it as quite complementary, at least in current treasury. I mean, things can always happen and disrupt, of course, but right now I see it as complementary. I think what I've heard most from the enterprise side interested in satellites during MWC was what to expect in terms of similar capacity and performance as we can foresee in the terrestrial networks. When can we take our use cases that we designed for a 5G or 4G urban environment and bring those to the forests or wherever there's additional coverage required from terrestrial, so from the satellites. So I think that's where we are right now, and personally, I'm very intrigued with that opportunity, of course, to expand.
I think you can take Starlink as in its normal offering. It's a very well working service. I think it has about 4 million users, but we should also be aware of that. Latency is actually very reasonable in continental Europe, but since we are further away from these Earth stations here in the Nordics, latency is not as good. And they have recently stopped selling subscriptions, I think, in UK because of lack of capacity.
Yeah.
So one should always understand that just because it's satellite, it will still follow the normal logic of coverage and capacity investments as more customers are coming.
So what about the regulatory aspects with satellites and IoT? Do you see any issues here, Luciana, or challenges?
I think, in Europe is more that we have the roaming regulation, right? So how will it play out? Now when you have also satellite. So I think that is the question that...
Who owns the data that passes through the sky?
Right? But I think it's more that, and then I think it is new. So, and like always, regulators, they take some time, to keep up with innovation.
When it comes to regulations, and I have a comment, but I thought first that we would harmonize the whole world as the same way as we saw for 5-10 years ago with GDPR. We've touched upon this, but that most of the rest of the world sort of adopted the principles. But I don't see that yet around AI, and definitely what you're telling me is not harmonized yet around regulations either. So yeah, we'll see. But give us a few years in the business here, we'll see what happens.
But the automotive customers, they did ask about satellite, even if they didn't ask about 6G, right?
They did.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
they
thought so.
did. They did. Yeah, I think there's a lot of question about that, and everybody more or less has it on its roadmap or something to look into. And so it's definitely a topic as a complementary technology, as you said. But I think the main question is still the timing. When is the right time maybe to introduce that technology in the car?
And speaking about decisions, which frequency band should I support for? What kind of technologies
Yeah.
are you looking at?
Yes, so it's I think it's a question about time, but a lot of expectations around satellites to secure coverage in rural areas, primarily for the important low data use case, emergency security stuff. Yeah.
A question I also heard that it could be also the use case for really like a backup. If cellular is down and then you have as a backup. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it could absolutely be the case. And once again, I think it also will be this use case driven, as you said, Anders, before, that maybe you in such a scenario you will not use it for everything, but for a certain critical communication, you could fall back to satellite. Yes.
Good. I was starting to think of rounding this off, but anyone who has some final reflection or come up with a question of their own? Bengt was having one in the past.
What could it be?
Otherwise, we could just summarize as well, saying that MWC 2025 was intense, maybe personally more intense than ever, actually, which is a great thing. A lot of impressions. Once again, we are in a situation where we're torn between the latest technologies that are presented today but maybe relevant tomorrow, but we also need to work with those from the past. The decisions people like ourselves in the industry and our customers need to take at all times. We need to guide them right here in this pretty technology-driven space that we're working in. And talking about space, we have satellite coming in as well, which makes it even more interesting. So to sum up, no rest, right? We continue struggling. But thanks for tuning in, and I wish you all a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.